Yo, folks, keeping it going here with Dave Grindle. We are throwing down yet another segment for the podcast covering The Unwilling, the rise of Zero Fail, and the eventual massive impact on the gaming industry that Zero Fail enterprises will have. Now, we talked a lot about locations and factions and a little bit about AI in the last segment. I want to keep the steam going. If you couldn't tell, this is pretty much right after the first one got recorded, but I want to keep discussing the feel of The Unwilling as a game. Now, I got myself into a predicament there at the end because I was discussing a very particular situation in which I think VR would be badass as far as the way the game would be played. But even so, I want to take the monotony out of MMOs. And so I think mixing player and AI control over the many various levels of how a game is played is the key. Now, I like how, again, I will start citing Mountain Blade right away, because I think were I to just want to work for or with Tale Worlds, The Unwilling would be a game much sooner, and I suppose that's an avenue to try and look down. But the fact that you have a flat world map, which you travel as a chess piece, almost like an icon, getting from place to place, the world continues to move regardless of what you're doing. And that is the most profound concept for me as a game designer, is that if I use cheats and I reveal the whole map and I just press the spacebar and watch the rest of the world, trading is going on. War is happening. People are traveling, and it's just this huge honeycomb, crazy complex of things moving. But when you look at the world in a compartmentalized way, you see how the construct makes a lot of sense. There are, as a basic layout, if we're talking Mountain Blade, you have cities, towns, villages. Okay, no. Cities, towns, castles, and that's it. And towns are located across the landscape of a given faction, over its terrain, whether it be snowlands, desert, the steppes, much like Mongolia, the forest and hill and mountain lands, the flat plains, and each of these places does have a bonus when it comes to their military troops. Now, what I like and what I would hope to see make a similar, if not yet much more polished appearance in The Unwilling, is that unless you pay mercenary troops, which are across the realm of tiers and gradings of soldiers and units, if you just recruit units from a faction's town, the more battles they fight in and the more experience they get through your own skill level as a trainer / their successes in battle, they're just recruits, and they've got pitchforks or simple spears. They have no armor. Some have knives, sickles. It definitely looks like you just paid 10 rupees and pulled this dude out of a village and said, "Come with me to seek your fortune." And I think it is so great to compare that and broadcast it into The Unwilling, where I see a town being a population of several hundred people. Now, that could, to me, more be like a village, because I see a village being a few hundred families. They all work together in a community to harvest the resources they need to get their agriculture taken care of to feed the population. They've built this infrastructure. They have commerce, shops, they have trade, they have these elements to them that feel very much like a fantasy RPG, where this living, breathing town is doing its own thing and you walk into it. Now, you will again walk out of it, but that town will remain. And I think the concept of living in each of these individual, realistic factions and their interactions with each other in war, starting the game, the conflict will be very much in the central continent, where in the story of the Unwilling, it takes place. In the beginning, right? Before the East and West start seeing their own respective invasions and combat taking place, and the geopolitical events that shift the balance of power and advantage throughout the course of the war. Now, we as the designers, we as the people pushing the buttons, making decisions for how the game is patched, I think allows us to dictate the movements in general of factions as the game goes on. Because having static, growing population centers, I mean, if you want to make a comparison, it would be like in WoW, when people got to these excessively powerful levels. You know, Warlords of Draenor, as I heard, because I stopped playing after Cataclysm, but I heard that that was about fortress building and resources and stuff like that, and which I will, you know, it's not going to hurt me to take a look into that and do a little research and see what fans liked about that and how I can implement. But my thought is the geography dictates the resources that are available, just like IRL. Now, those nations that have prolific access to precious metals are going to have an advantage, you know, when it comes to that, and the goods they produce will be dictated by that, where nations situated in much more forested areas do have a particularly well-running and profitable lumber market. Now, I don't think that resources can run out because, okay, now, it would be interesting if raw resources could run out, like there's only so many mountains and so much ore to be mined, but that's much the same with our own culture, but mass can be neither created nor destroyed, so it's just an eternal wellspring of all of these, depending on location, these resources which are harnessed by their factions respectively. So what I like, though, is that a player doesn't have any direction in which they have to go the second the game starts. Now, I continue to work on the leveling system because I don't want there to be levels. Now, levels just sort of represent for me the general power status of NPC or player blank. When you come across, okay, so you gain experience by going through the motions of whatever it is you're trying to get in a learning style. So if I wanted to be a miner, I've been mining on video games since RuneScape 2D. Since the original RuneScape when I was in middle school, right? Yeah, middle school. And I would like to say that somebody who says to themselves, I want to be a great miner, is going to realize that you don't get your strength stats and your agility, dexterity stats are what determine your speed at mining. But it doesn't take skills to be a miner, and you don't have to be any level to mine more precious materials. If you want to be a miner, buy a pickaxe and go start mining somewhere. But if you just start tunneling into the side of a mountain somewhere, you just took a huge gamble. I mean, that's how it has to happen. You have to start mining somewhere. But you're going to be mining stone. Now, if you want to bring back a load of stone to the town and sell it to be used for building or mortar or this or that, don't think that you're going to mine from a mountain, 3 miles away and then carry these heavy cars. Like, if you want to drag a sled of rock, a 300, 400, 500 pound to be profitable sled of rock for your trip, and you're going to take it back to the, quartermaster number 7 of this town or city, that's going to be a ton of work and you'll make money for it. But I think you can go work for a mining company that is AI run at game start and say, okay, I'll be a laborer, but the attitude of commerce being different in the Unwilling your system of profit for being a miner is like, you either bring your own sled or rent one from us, and you mine as long as you can. You do as much mining as you want. Bring us everything. We'll load it onto our carts and our wagons with the horses we own and the equipment we own. And, either rent your pickaxe from us, at a deduction from your final pay, or bring your own, that kind of thing, and work for a day, make money. And you'll make good money, but you won't be making the same money you would if you were a supervisor. You wouldn't be making the same money you did if you were owning a mining company. Now, what I love is that players will eventually own mining companies, but they won't just own mining companies. They'll own lumber companies, sawmills, granaries, farmland, forges, blacksmiths, stables, inns, breweries, fletching shops. Like, let me benefit. Let us all benefit from the fact that RTSs, RPGs, and adventure games have been laying this groundwork for decades. So it's just mathematical. We'll keep going into sub-levels until we can't make it any more interesting for each and every profession a player could pick. Now, what I love is how players would go about with forging and weapon crafting, armor crafting, tanning, leatherworking, that kind of stuff, because it's not just an ambient button click and you skin an animal out in the wild. Like, I think there is a button push and interaction for each step of the process, especially if we're talking consoles. Now, with the mouse interface on a PC, we could do a hell of a lot. When it comes to feeling like you are accomplished, when you're sitting in your mansion, when you're sitting in your estate, a year and a half, 2 years after. What I like about that also is that it's not just grinding for experience. Like, you have to, anybody could be a blacksmith. But the person who makes renowned armor, the person who everybody comes to, who the people with the deepest pockets come to have their shit made, is who you want to deal with. And when they are players, that means that they have spent the amount of time it was. If they're a natural prodigy, that's reflected in the game. If 2 months after the game starts, there's somebody who's worth millions in game through playing day and night, in and out, as so many addicts are known to do across the gaming world. They sit on renown. If you're a player and you're in one of the capital cities that represent each faction, and you not only have a rapport with the AI or player sovereign and the royalty, the nobility, the government of each of these factions, and you're extremely influential in the community through your renown, your respect levels, your right to rule, all of these great little aspects that can go up repeatedly with your actions. Some players aren't going to want to do that. I mean, that is really special to me. When a player goes from walking into a shithouse forge in town 492 across the spans of the world, where they chose to generate, I mean, when player generation comes in and character creation, it's going to be real. That's going to need a whole podcast to itself, because I've assembled all of the greatest aspects from across the games who have really been known for epic, excellent character creation. Pardon my smoke and my exhalation, but you can tell I'm getting heated about this. Now, okay, so not every player is going to want to be that. Just like not every person in the world wants to be a rich business person. Some players are going to start the game and take the initial opportunity to train, to fight in brawls, to do some of these, like to train themselves in courses, to take classes, to do tutorials, because we can implement 50 tutorial systems and they would be fun and unique every time because they're player driven. It's not a rigid thing and it's not something you have to do. By simply creating your player, I want player creation to take no less than 10 minutes for each player. And because I want it to be so in depth and give each player the opportunity to craft their ideal character for this giant, epic, open, beautiful realm with this compelling, rich, awesome story that's written for them. And that, in essence, will cover a trifecta that will make the Unwilling unchallengeable. And the perfect candidate not only for this era in which Xbox and PlayStation are uniting, and let's hope that we can connect all three variants of gamers. Okay, now I'm not going to talk about Wii U and all that stuff. Well, I mean, just know that every gamer should, in the next decade, be able to game as one collective. And if it takes the investment of building the hardware and the equipment and the locations required all across the world, and generates the desire and the practicality of having communications equipment and a way to connect to the entire world in every home, I think that drives progress outside the hopes of just making a good game. It drives us towards a Ready Player One, where, okay, no, because the geopolitical situation was terrible outside of the gaming industry, but the gaming industry was perfect. Now, I think it will, and I mean, that's a conversation for another time, because I think we're hot on the feel of the Unwilling now, the feel of the game. If you want to set off and be a warrior, the hardest concept for me as the creator is deciding the likelihood and the consequences of death. Because in this world where it's not only so easy to die, but so likely, especially with these combat mechanics, like this is not right click and hotkey. This is WASD to control the general X and Y movement of your character, but the manipulation of, if I go off the PC right now, we can come up with a controller equivalent, but holding, again, I'm grabbing you here, Tail Worlds. You have to be in the mix with me for this, because you have laid the groundwork more than anything else for the future perfection of massively multiplayer online gaming. Okay? So, staying on it. Controlling with your left mouse button clicked, you have cocked back with your right hand, which will most likely be a weapon if we're talking about combat. A sword, an axe, a mace, a dagger, okay, anything. So I'm cocked back, and releasing the left mouse button will swing or thrust or bash. But while I'm cocked back and I'm aiming, moving the mouse button like angel's wings, or up and down straight vertically, will bring up my hand, move my hand around, which then determines how I strike when I strike. Not being able to control your left and right hand by not being able to have the right and left mouse buttons depressed at the same time, reflects the concentration a human being on the melee, battlefield is in that train of thought with hundreds of bodies moving around you, and you're concentrating just on what you can identify as your main opponent. Keeping in mind that at any time somebody could slash you, stab you, you could catch an arrow, you could get bashed, your limbs could be, your brain could be smashed in by anybody just walking by that wasn't fighting anybody else. But you see the hectic nature of the melee battlefield that we've come to know in fantasy, but trust me, dude, 8 versus 8, 10v10, 16, 20, 30 v30, 2016 ain't nothing. Ain't nothing. It is a disgrace in the technological age we live in. Now, I might be talking out of passion and opinion, and I have no engineering basis yet to know what the limitations are and why PvP has to be instanced for the most part. To me, the point is to feel like you're in the game. And when you're on the battlefield and you're an archer, now you as a singular player travel the scapes doing what you want to do unless you've made an obligation to an AI or player-run collective, in which, hashtag EVE Online right here, you can work as part of a player-run syndicate or any of these organizations, and in doing so, you're kind of at their whim in the Unwilling, okay? Now, if I have a player-run syndicate and you come to me as another player and you say, I'd like to work for you because I hear you have smuggling operations, both air and sea smuggling operations that you run, mercenary corps that don't fight frontline battles, that you send out teams of 5 or 10 dudes on a quest to assassinate somebody, and you take a big paycheck for that, both as you and me. That's what I want to do. I'm a good ass archer, and I can put an arrow through somebody's nostril from 100 yards away. I, as a syndicate leader, and more importantly as a player, am going to be like, yeah, okay, so why don't you show me? And when you and I walk out back to the archery range that's on my compound's premises, I watch you knock a bow. Now, all your time as an archer, plus your training, your everything, that all the aspects and attributes and skills and points that you put in to your archery on character creation and everything that gains you experience since has... Now, don't get me wrong, there's caveats with that, right? If you have been training for most of your time with short bows, and you're an ace with a short bow, but you come across a vendor that has a much more powerfully built longbow, and you say to yourself as a person, oh, well, I've got the archery experience, this'll bump up my damage a hell of a lot. Because there's no stats like that. I don't want there to be any stats that a player can see, unless they've got the skills, okay? But you pick up a sweet longbow because you get the innate feeling that this has a higher damage level. And then you come to me right after that. You see the doors to my syndicate compound. You come in there, after my guards let you in, and you talk to one or two other people and say, that sort of judge you. And if you've made it to me, I know that you might be a worthy candidate. And you pull out this longbow, and you're not used to the drawback. You haven't trained with it, and you put an arrow wide left or right. I'm going to politely decline you. Or I could tell you to get the fuck out and don't come back. Or we could go another route, possibly, for wasting my time. If I'm the player, if I'm the person behind the player that is the type to be like, get this kid out of here, or kill him, and you get your head sawed off right there in front of me because I'm a mob boss, essentially. And I deal with people that can put my guys can put an arrowhead through a nostril at 200 yards. So get with me on that, as they put them between your nostrils from 215, just to get a little more XP while they're chilling. But if you do come in there and you perform well, and I say, okay, well, here's the deal. I got a team going out tonight that is being paid, I'm getting paid 10,000 gold or 10,000 coins to take out a governor that was just sent here in our own faction. Let's say we're in Gascar, and you're a Gascaran archer, man, and you're pretty good on board a traditional sea ship. You've spent some time as a smuggler, right? So you come to work for me and my syndicate, blah, that whole situation plays out. And me as a person, I accept your skills. I like what you do. You don't warp to a quest point or anything. You and the 4 other people who are going to split, you're going to get 1,000 coins each, and I'm going to keep 5, which is a good sum. Okay, that can buy some shiz right there. So you guys have to get on a ship. That ship has to sail all the way to where you're supposed to be. Now, thank goodness it's your own faction. Now, the cost of that money that you're getting paid and the incredible scale to which jobs can be pulled off and paid off, you're paying for that in your time and your effort in the difficulty. I mean, if somebody says there's a floating contract on the table, and even if this is 2 years in game, the sovereigns, the figureheads of these factions, have such a presence and such an effect on the game that you might expect that I would go the WoW route. That soldiers walking around the city in Stormwind, and okay, so let's say Silver Spear. Silver Spear is the capital city of the Empire of Silic. You would think that soldiers walking around Silver Spear would be 3 skulled out opponents. That even as a max level character, you couldn't get into that city yourself. Hell no, bullshit. The king would have like 50 billion HP and need a whole raid party to take him out because of him and his couple of epic sidekicks. Nah, man. The king, the Emperor of Silic, is a mortal man. And the reason why, and though he is incredibly skilled in many different arts, if you put a arrow through the stained glass above his throne and put an arrow through the top of his head, he would die. His brain would be hit with an arrow and it would be blasted into his neck and his chest cavity, and he would just sort of like wobble there as his eyes rolled back in his head and he'd slump in his throne. He'd be dead. And the likelihood of you getting away is slim to none because you're on the roof of his palace and he's just been assassinated, and there are tens of thousands of troops garrisoned in Silver Spear. There are hundreds of thousands of troops, and there are 2 to 3 major air depots surrounding the palace. Not for the protection of the palace, but because of the build of the city. So there are hundreds of airships. There are hundreds of thousands of troops that are on foot and horseback that are armored. They're in the core. They're at the heart of the empire. These are the elite. These are not conscripted troops. And a cultural aspect of Silic is that boys and girls both, should they elect to, at 12 years old, are taken into the military fold, given extensive training, education, are paid very well, and are funneled through officer training, through enlisted training to serve in prior the Navy, just the Navy, but now the Air Corps. And the Air Corps academies of Silic are some of the most impressive in the world. Their engineering departments are some of the most impressive and resourceful in the world, which makes them an epic contender when so many nations are forced to rise against them. Now, however, the main conflict, the degree to which you choose your allegiance in the game is very different from many others. Because if you want to be born under any of these flags, you accept your birthright citizenship of them. Now, you can be born in Laddox, walk your ass as an adult right over to the border of Yaskar and tell them, I want to be a mercenary, or I want to be this or that. And they'll say, all right, go on ahead, pay the entrance toll, and go. Boom. That's how it is, man. But, I mean, if you're born a Cilician, you more than likely have spent your entire life under the guidance and leadership of an emperor, an emperor that has made life worth living, whether you live in the capital or the stickest boondock town. Because everybody is a citizen of Silic, and everybody loves the emperor because the emperor has made all of Silic powerful, not just himself and his cohorts. There are other factions that cannot say the same, and there are other factions where life is entirely different. Where if you're a son of a Regalian exploration firm deckhand, then life is very different and you don't have the advantages of royalty. But that's the key, man. You're born where you're born. Just like in IRL, you're born into the game, and the game flows as life flows around you as a player and as a person. So get with me, dude.